And we've got an email question that's already lined up to go. Let's look at it. What counts as pain and suffering? Well, actually, this is a little bit different than the one you gave us, Chris. So what counts as pain and suffering damages in a case, and do they apply those here in Florida? Okay, that's Cole. That's not a loving the law topic. That's something that I do, Stan, so I'm going to take this one. How about that?
I think so.
So, Cole, what counts as pain and suffering damages? It's called general damages. When you've been involved in an automobile accident or some type of slip and fall, it's what's called general damages. You have non-economic damages, and it is limited, in this case, pain and suffering, physical pain and mental suffering as a result of the injury. And yes, they do apply in Florida. They apply in Alabama as well as in Georgia, except in wrongful death in Alabama. And wrongful death in Alabama, the measure of damages is punitive damages. It is not pain and suffering, and that's kind of weird, but in the state of Alabama, wrongful death damages, they want to punish the wrongdoer, deter the wrongdoer from committing something, a negligent act that would prevent that, kind of hold them out, if you will, so that they would not do it again, act as a deterrent. And so that's why there's punitive damages involved in wrongful death cases, and there's no pain and suffering damages in wrongful death cases. But yes, Cole, there are pain and suffering damages, and whether or not they apply in your case depends on a case-by-case basis. And so that's why you need to reach out to an attorney and talk, get a little bit more information. Let's find out what's going on and see if you qualify for those pain and suffering damages. So there you go. So we got our first question in the books, and Stan, I was approached by somebody this past weekend, or not this past weekend, this weekend, and we were talking about a life estate versus and then you brought up a Ladybird deed. Let me kind of tell everybody how I was approached, and then you can kind of step in here and give your best advice to the family member. So we have a gentleman who's elderly. He's over 80 years old. His wife died a few years ago. There are 3 children, and he sold his property to the children, the homestead property to the children, about 30-something acres. And in doing so, though, he told us that he retained a life estate. Now, we have not seen the documentation and paperwork. Now that he's done this and the children have paid some money, of course, the children want him off the property sooner than the life estate would expire. And he wants to kind of go back on the deal. So, Stan, let's talk about that. First of all, what is a life estate? You mentioned something called a Ladybird deed to me and as we were getting ready for the show. How could this gentleman, we'll call him Wilson, how could we help Wilson out here in this particular situation at this point in time, and advice for others in Wilson's situation about maybe what to do or consider?
Well, first of all, the devil's in the details, and whatever that life estate says, as far as the actual words, the actual language, that's important. That would have to be closely inspected and looked at. The Ladybird deed is something different than a life estate.
Let's define life estate first, and then you can talk about a Ladybird deed.
A life estate says Wilson, that's who we're talking about.
Yes.
Wilson gives the same property that he currently owns to Wilson and his son, John. Okay? So that's what a life estate says, and it gives the land to himself with a life estate and to John thereafter. Part of what that does is it guarantees that when Wilson stops breathing and there's a death certificate that shows he actually has passed away, that means that that property, upon the death of Wilson, immediately transfers to his son John. There is no need to run down to the courthouse and have some sort of extra plan. Technically, that could even be a transfer that is just on the books and it exists. And as long as John is still living, John owns that property and can turn and sell or do or rent as he sees fit once he produces that death certificate. And if it is needed to be sold by John later, by showing the death certificate, John would be able to show, I'm the current owner, living and breathing, and I can sell it, rent it, do what I want to with it. That's the process of a life estate. The benefit of a Ladybird deed, and the term is a term of art, but basically it simply says Wilson can leave the property to himself and to his daughter Mary, and that Wilson retains the authority to change that deed at any point that Wilson is still living. So Wilson can give it to his daughter this year, and then next year for John's birthday, he can turn around and transfer it to himself and to John, and that is the Ladybird deed mechanism of transferring property. It's a little more technical in terms of how the wording gets done, but basically it is a way for a party or a person to transfer property to their children or other relatives or even to their grandchildren. We have a lot of, shall we say, unique family constellations now. We've even got grandparents raising their own grandchildren due to the biological parents perhaps not doing their job correctly or not acting responsibly toward their toward the grandchildren. And you have a lot of grandparents now that are raising their own grandchildren. That's not the way it's supposed to be according to the way the normal family develops, but that is what's happening.
Okay. Well, very good.